Hello and welcome back to the Innovation Room, a podcast where we sit down and talk with researchers, authors, leaders, innovators, and a bunch of other fascinating people about the tools, strategies, and tactics for taking our innovation efforts further. This episode is brought to you by Hype Innovation. I'm Colin Nelson, the host of today's episode, and I'm delighted to be joined by Braden Kelley. Now, Braden is an experienced innovation speaker, workshop facilitator, and experienced designer. He's the author of Charting Change, now in its second edition, and Stoking Your Innovation Bonfire. He's the creator of human-centered change methodology and the founder of blogginginnovation.com. He's been advising companies on how to increase their revenue and cut costs since 1996, and he speaks and writes about the topic of human-centered innovation, transformation, change, and design. He has maximized profits for companies whilst living and working in England, Germany, and the United States. So without any further ado, please welcome Braden. So welcome, Braden, and thank you for joining me from, eight time zones away today. You're in the Pacific Northwest of the US. I'm in the UK. How do we find you today?
Good, Colin. It's great to be with you. It's a nice gray day here in the Northwest, but that's typical. We're looking forward to the sunny summer.
Yep. So gray days are things I know very well. So Braden, you and I don't get to chat very often. We sometimes pass as ships in the night at innovation conferences here and there. And obviously, I've been part of this innovation ecosystem for a couple of decades myself. But I think one question I've never asked you is how you got into the innovation industry. How did you find your way into this weird and wonderful world? I find people's career paths into innovation isn't always very linear. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you found yourself here.
Yeah, so my innovation journey began back when this thing called the internet looked like it was going to catch on, and I was working for Symantec at the time, and when we were just providing support on bulletin boards and by the phone, and on America Online and CompuServe, and so I raised my hand to build the company's first web-based technical support and customer service capabilities, and using design thinking principles before design thinking was really an accepted methodology. It's just kind of the way that I and my team worked, and I had the opportunity to work with a lot of great designers, and just really focused on the customer from the very beginning and did a lot of iterative design. And so that's kind of where my innovation journey began, was using human-centered design principles to create something new for the internet. And then from there it went to creating a lot of other workflow applications for the company, and then externally as a consultant for other companies, and really helping companies digitally transform. And so it's really always been for me about the people and looking for insights, and driving innovation possibilities off of insights and not off ideas.
Interesting. And at what point through your career did you think, you know what, I'd like to write, I'd like to put out into the world some of my thinking. I think I've got something to say that's unique and other people are not necessarily talking about enough.
Yeah. So that was around about 2006. I started blogginginnovation.com, and originally that was just because I had a few things to say around innovation that I thought, hopefully were unique, and hopefully added to the conversation. And innovation as a a profession, as a pursuit, an organized pursuit, was kind of emerging around that time. And so I started writing an article here and there to share some thoughts. And then because of some work that I had done in the online marketing space, I had learned how to attract people to a website. And so I started to feel like the audience that I had built up was, it was kind of wasteful for it to be just my voice. And so I started to invite in other voices to the conversation. And then traffic continued to grow, and the conversation continued to grow. And then that emerged into innovationexcellence.com, which
Mm.
grew a large and loyal following, which I appreciate all of the people that have participated in that conversation over the years. And then we sold that in a few years ago. And recently I've spun back up blogginginnovation.com to continue that conversation, and have invited a lot of great voices into that conversation. Like you mentioned John Besant earlier, and other voices like Greg Sissel and Robin Bolton, and even Jeffrey Moore, author of Crossing the Chasm. So I have a lot of good contributing authors. Just really believe in that innovation insights that aren't shared or wasted, and so I just really like to do what I can to help accelerate innovation, because with some of these problems we're facing, that may be our only way out.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, Innovation Excellence was the first time I got to hear about you, and it was through that I think we met originally in Boston. I remember Julie and Rowan and others part of that network. I came from a background where I was doing the job of innovation, but it wasn't really respected as a professional discipline. It was the job similar to you when you talked about design thinking. It wasn't really specified. We were just doing the work of innovation, and it was later on that I discovered that actually there's some experiences there that might be useful for other parts of my career. I'm going to go back to the book that you wrote, Stoking Your Innovation Bonfire, with your friend of mine, Rowan Gibson. I think one of the obstacles, it's in one of the sections in the obstacles section, I think is really fascinating to me. I think this was written about 14 years ago. Does that sound about right? Something of that
Yeah,
order. Yeah, about right.
2010. Yeah.
Perfect. So, one of the obstacles and one of my pet peeves has always been organizations not respecting and measuring, or even recognizing the cost of doing nothing, the cost of standing still. And I think that's one of these big obstacles that I still see certain industries still wrestling with. And I wondered over those 14 years whether obstacles like that you've seen that things have improved, or do you still think we're struggling and wrestling with many of those same challenges?
Well, I think that we will always struggle with some of those challenges, because the fact of the matter is that budgets are generally fixed. There's not an unlimited supply of money. During downturns, then the budgets tend to shrink, and so people are always fighting for resources, and those can be financial resources, human resources, capital resources, and so there's always going to be challenges to innovation, and there's always going to be, especially as companies grow, the way that companies tend to grow is that increasing bureaucracy starts to occur as companies grow. So the walls are very low when you're a startup, and as things grow, then you have to have increasing formalization of processes, and increasing governance and things like that to help the organization scale. And so I think that some of those barriers will always be there, and so the better we can understand them, and the better that we can you know codify and share the ways to overcome the known barriers, then I think that the easier they are to work with. Once we know they exist, and how to go either over, under, around, or through them.
Mm. I think that sort of plays into something that I often talk about, which is a common language between leadership and innovators, somewhere where we can actually have that common way of talking about it, as opposed to it being that two heads bashing against each other. Where the innovator says, "I need all these resources, I need all this capacity, I need all this budget to be able to do anything," and leadership say, "Yes, but I need to keep the boat floating right now," and everybody's operationally busy,
Yep.
and there has to be a way of talking at least about building the plane while we're flying it
Yep.
before we can even bottom it out. Well, and you mentioned standards. We have later in 2024 ISO 56001 being published, a standard for innovation management. And I wondered how you feel about this. I've had a real wide variety of reactions through my conversations. At one end of the scale, people say you can't standardize innovation. The other end of the scale, people saying we desperately need standards to be able to give us that right to put some of those building blocks in place that you speak about. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to things like standardization, I think it's more important the standard of tools in the toolbox. I think you can provide people with a set of standard tools, and you go into any profession, you go into the construction industry, and they're going to have a set of standard tools. There's not different size wrenches. That everybody has their own measurement system, or something like that. So everybody's agreed upon either a metric, or an English standard measuring system, and so all the tools are based on that. And so by having a set of standard tools, then you can be flexible to the challenges that you face out in front of you, and you also then have a way of empowering new people into the role, or into the profession, to approach things in a way that has proven somewhat successful over time. And so I think that bodies of knowledge are useful. So there's the the project management body of knowledge, the PMBOK, that a lot of business professionals be familiar with. The Association for Change Management Professionals has a body of knowledge, and so the good thing about some of these pursuits of standards is that they cause people to get together and talk about what works and what doesn't work, and to coddle to get not coddle cobble together some tools and approaches that a good variety of experienced people can agree on. But you have to maintain that flexibility,
Yeah.
and so yeah. So I think that the key thing is that as we move forward in innovation, there's going to be new people coming in all the time, and the advantage that those new people have is that they don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
And if they look for proven methods, they can find them now. And if they go to conferences and things like that, then they can exchange ideas with people that have already potentially solved the challenge that they might be facing now. And so there's a lot of things that people have now that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago.
For sure. Where we're not making up as we go along, but it really was a lot of trial and error, that's for sure. It's interesting. I see quite different reactions in, say, services organizations where perhaps there isn't that innovation engine in the same way, shape, or form that you might find in an automotive company or an aerospace company where they've always had to innovate to survive. And again, reactions to standards seem to vary. So the companies where there's that long history of continually innovating to ensure the organization survives, they look at standards and go, well, we're kind of doing this stuff already. But there's industries where perhaps we've not necessarily nearly had to change too much, maybe a government agency or a law firm or even an insurance company, and primarily done a lot of incremental innovation only. I think there's a difference in terms of reaction, and they are looking to lean on the experts and people that have done this before and not have to reinvent the wheel. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it progresses for sure. Um, I'm a keen advocate of helping organizations change, and you wrote the book Charting Change. Given your innovation history, I wondered how you're starting to see those two worlds align. I'm seeing some commonalities as I move forward in my career between the corporate innovator and their attitudes and the corporate change manager and their attitudes. I suspect you feel the same, but you and I have never talked about this. So I'm wondering whether your interest in change was born out of innovation or vice versa. Maybe you can talk a little bit about there and where you see those commonalities.
Yes, yes. So I think, Colin, that, as you kind of mentioned, the fact of the matter is how my view on the connection between innovation and change has emerged over time. And like you said, the first book, and you never know whether it's going to get blurred out by the
Yeah.
background. So it looks like it's going
We'll
to,
put it in the show notes. Don't worry.
but I was going to do a little show and tell but that's not going to work. So Stoking Innovation Bonfire is really all about helping people build a continuous innovation infrastructure, and how to make innovation not just a one-time event, but something that you can do on a repeatable basis, and what are the things that you need to put in place to make that happen. And in putting that together and in continuing to practice innovation and to speak with innovation professionals at a lot of different companies all around the world, it did, like you said, one of the key things that for me started to pop out was that innovation is all about change. And so, as I looked across the change literature landscape, uh, I didn't really find a lot that would help people be successful in pursuing change in an organized and effective fashion. There's some
Mhm.
theories and things like that. And so what I really felt was like what was lacking was a set of tools to help make change more visual, more collaborative. As innovators, we get very used to working with sticky notes and standing up with groups of people at a wall and accumulating our ideas and collecting and connecting the dots. And so, what I felt was really needed was that kind of approach, that design thinking kind of approach, that human-centered design kind of approach, visual and collaborative. And so that's where charting change came from. Was the I started creating tools to help people um, pursue the planning of change, because you have to plan it before you can execute it.
Yep.
So created a set of tools for planning and executing change. They're all visual. So there's a change planning canvas at the center, and then there's a lot of tools to help people think through what needs to be part of a formal approach to change or transformation. And so that's where the second book came from, was to help explain that human-centered change methodology that is surrounding the change planning toolkit, which is a set of 70 plus tools that have, started as 50 and now it's about 70. And yeah, and so people that buy the book get a taste. They get like 26 of the 70, including the change planning canvas, for purchasing the book. And then it lays out some of the methodologies and then some of the tools that go behind helping to make organizational change a little easier and less confusing for people to approach.
That's interesting, and I hadn't thought about this beforehand. And I wonder whether you'd throw continuous improvement into the mix here as well, because one of the observation that I would make is that in many cases, the established methodologies that exist for continuous improvement could well be supercharged by some innovation methodologies. I find often they're not as collaborative as we might think about change within the innovation world. And yeah, I don't know, has that crossed the path as well? Supercharging things like DMAIC and Lean, Six Sigma, these sorts of things, and using some of that thinking to make those better.
Well, I think that there are best practices within the continuous innovation space that are adjacent to innovation, and I think that continuous improvement and innovation and organizational change are all really closely related.
Mm.
And so some might say that the continuous improvement methodologies will help power your incremental innovation, and really understanding the humans will help power your more breakthrough types of innovation. And so things like value stream mapping and and some of the ways that I've seen people approach continuous improvement, where they as they run some of their events, they invite customers in to participate in those events. Those kinds of activities are similar to the way an innovation professional or a human-centered design professional might think about things and help make the practice of continuous improvement better. And yeah, and so there's things that each group can learn from the other, and using them together definitely improves your chances of continued success as an organization.
That's great observation. I think, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Um, I wonder, when you look back at your career and you look at where we are today as innovators, especially innovators working a lot within the corporate environment. We have UN Sustainable Development Goals that are changing organizations' perspectives. I see that's one dimension. We have artificial intelligence that's beginning to again change people's perspectives on what might be possible, and how where they take their businesses. Where do you think the biggest challenges are for innovators today? This industry is not quite at what it was 15 years ago. I think it's much more developed, as we talked about already, but there are still some big meaty problems that we have to solve. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think that the world is always going to be changing, and the forces that are acting upon us from outside are always going to be changing. And so I think that as innovation professionals, while tools and processes are useful and important, the biggest thing, the best investment that people can make is really understanding the human side of innovation, or the human side of change. Because the humans also are always changing.
Right.
But the better that you the better that you understand the humans, then you can apply whatever tool emerges to help solve a problem for the humans. And so as artificial intelligence emerges, then we can take advantage of that. And it's really interesting. I was actually looking back on an article and a white paper that I wrote actually 10 years ago now, and it was really all about taking advantage of crowd computing. And it was really all around the idea of how do you make work atomic? How do you break up work into the right level of specificity that you can have the humans and the machines working together? And back in 2014, the white paper was commissioned by a company that was called Crowd Computing Systems at the time, but they've changed their name since then. I don't remember the current name. But back then they were looking at how do you take a human activity that can be somewhat standardized, and then sort of train a computer to do it, or how can you break it up small enough that you can use mechanical Turk or other crowdsourced labor type operations to get that small little micro task executed and accumulate those micro tasks into a full task. And which of those micro tasks can be done by a computer, which of those micro tasks can be done by a human. And so that it's interesting that,
Here we are.
while, yeah,
Yeah.
here we are. So while it may have been, more primitive artificial intelligence that they were using 10 years ago, um, that concept of atomizing work can be, used today, and we have more powerful tools to use. And potentially that element that I wrote, about 10 years ago that could have been, outsourced to Mechanical Turk or, to a human, in a lower cost labor country, really simple task, verify that this image contains a V and an I or whatever it might be. Um, that now is potentially even more of those kinds of tasks can be done by the machine. And so, that's an interesting thing, is that you see that as the tools evolve, if you have the right approach, then you just evolve the tools that are going into the approach. You don't net, that the approach may still work. And
Right.
so,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's
it's a
just really
fascinating
interesting.
time. I'm seeing very different approaches to AI in different industries. For some, it's transforming their business models. For others, it's a nice thing that they're still playing around with and trying to work out what on earth they're going to do. For others, they see opportunities to interpret data that they've never had before. And I think in many cases, organizations are still wrestling with what does this mean for our business, and what should our direction of travel be. Well, one thing's for sure, it's changing everything. Whether you're checking something against compliance rules in financial services, or whether you're I don't know, trying to generate a contract that you may have generated many times before. Machines can do this for us, and well, hopefully it gives us more free time, but I suspect it won't. It's an interesting one. What about the topic of sustainability? Are you seeing that sort of penetrate the fringes or even the core of where organizations are trying to innovate? I've started to see increasingly companies changing their products that they're selling. They want them to be maybe more recyclable. I've seen organizations look at how they operate to try and perhaps reduce the impact they have on the climate. Are you also seeing that, and that being a big driver for a push in improving innovation performance even?
Well, I think it depends is the answer, and I think one of the things that drives the variance between companies is how important sustainability is to them. And so some companies have it, at the core of their mission. Companies like HCL Tech that really are invested in making sustainability a part of what they do, and how they harness the energy of their employees. And you see as you look at some of the things that employees work on, that pop out, interesting things. Like, so I saw a video that was put together by somebody in the group that I work with. And the example that they chose to use was an employee experience example. And it was all about, oh, here is your Mr. Johnson, your sustainable flight options. So it was using artificial intelligence, in the concept to help identify flights that were more sustainable than others,
Interesting.
that had lower carbon footprints than others. And so, it's an interesting application, I thought, and it showed, the mindset of somebody that has sustainability in the back of their mind. And so it's really great opportunity for companies to think about, not just how they can focus their business in selling something that's either more sustainable, or that contributes to sustainability, but how can we imbue a sustainability as a focus within a lot of different things that we do as an organization.
Yeah, to me, it's an interesting topic for lots of reasons. Maybe in another podcast we can talk more about these. But one big theme I'm seeing is that, still from a consumer perspective, the vast majority of consumers expect sustainability, but won't necessarily pay a premium for it, which is of course a challenge if you're in that business. And the other big theme that I think where innovation can perhaps play a role is bringing together value chains. I see sometimes it takes far too long for a need to dribble down through a supply chain, for example, which maybe has a sustainability component. And the risk, of course, is we just push the problem around. Some value chains can take 5-10 years for something to have that ripple effect. And I think there's an opportunity for innovation to help accelerate that journey. We'll see how things emerge. Listen, Braden, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. For those of you who are interested in your writing, where can they find you? Can you maybe just give people an indication how to hear more about your thinking in this space?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to remember is blogginginnovation.com will take you right to the blog, which has my thoughts and also the thoughts of other innovators as well to share with the community. And there's a group on LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn, then you'll start to learn more not only about my work but also the communities that I curate on LinkedIn. And bradenkelley.com is my website, but blogginginnovation.com will take you there, and that's where you can find out about my books. That's where you can find out how to follow me on things like X or Facebook or LinkedIn. And yeah, and so always thinking about new things and writing whatever I can that I think might be useful to people, and always looking for other insights to share as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put all of those in the show notes for those people that are watching and listening, so they can find you easily. So yeah, thank you ever so much, Braden. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure, Colin.
So that wraps up today's episode of the Innovation Room. Thank you so much for watching or listening. All the links and resources mentioned throughout the episode will be linked down in the show notes or video description, depending on where you're taking this podcast from. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please leave a review, or if you're watching on YouTube, consider subscribing. Feel free to leave us any comments, questions, or ideas about the episode down below. We would love to hear what you think. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.